Hey,
Wow.
everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you today. Very excited to have Randy rejoining us. We got Kate coming back after a very long time. Great to see you, Kate. We're going to do intros here in a second, but while I am doing this, y'all should be doing yours. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff so you get your emails in the morning or afternoons or evenings, actually, now that whenever we go live, which is, of course, every day. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, shoot them up in the comment section and we will engage them directly, kind of like this one. Winterstorm, good evening, team. Good to see you, buddy. So today, actually, let's get some intros first because it's been a while. Kate, can you give us a quick 10 to 15 second who you are, where you come from, all that good stuff? Give her.
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Kate. I'm originally from Halifax, and I've been in the Navy for 16 years now. And I also have a podcast called Shoot Like a Girl. So interviewing different women from all over the world and military women, and just getting their stories out there.
And it's an excellent podcast. So if you guys aren't following it, you absolutely should be. Randy, want to give us another 10, 15 seconds? Who we are, where we come from? Hit it.
Sure. Awesome. Yep. I'm Randy. I am with Direct Action Combat Performance based out of Ottawa, also originally born and raised in Halifax, providing services, training, mentorship, and everything that has to do with a full spectrum combative approach to life. So a lot of what I do is provide for military and law enforcement, but I also have a strong following of the general public. So that's who I am, based out of Ottawa.
Bam, just like that. And everybody knows us, so we don't really need to go into that one. So today we are going to be talking service in society. And I figured I'd get us started off because it is Remembrance Day with a definition of remembrance. And then I'm going to go around and talk and ask you guys what you guys think about remembrance. So, remembrance, the act or process of remembering, the state of being remembered, or something serving to celebrate or honor the memory of a person or event, such as a memorial. So, very quick, dirty definition, but what do you guys think? When you hear the term remembrance, what's your first thoughts, Kate? Coming to you first, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, well, this one's interesting because I think growing up, we always had World War II veterans come in and talk to our school. And so my idea then of sort of a veteran and remembrance was a really, these really sort of older men who fought in World War I and II. And then as I, joined the military and started seeing like the people who were coming back from Afghanistan and even other deployments around the world, because Afghanistan and Iraq are sort of more high profile and very combat involved, but there's a lot of other sort of troops that are out sailing, and Air Force people that are out doing their thing all around the world quite often, that a lot of people um, don't really realize and don't necessarily think about all the time. So it's kind of important to remember everything that they do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Randy, what are your first thoughts?
First thoughts is remembering those who are in service to the country, and that means different things to different people. But a lot of what makes the heat and light in media is combat soldiers, but there's so much more to it than just the front line. There are five folks that are doing good things in behind, in the shadows, so to speak, to allow those combat soldiers to do what they need to do. So it's service to the country in multitudes of facets. It's not just the front line, but it's the people from everything who fix your guns, who put socks on the shelves, who allow you to get the equipment that you need to do your job. So they are in service to the country. It's in remembrance to everybody who's in a part of a team to allow a nation to do good things for others.
That's very good. Well put. Shaun, what are your first thoughts?
I didn't have any until I listened to the guests, and so, which is usually the case. Um, Remembrance Day or remembrance to me is something that is ever evolving. And I often look back a year or two in the past and think I didn't really remember it as well as I should have, or I didn't really understand it as well as I should have. I think it started for me when I was a young kid, watching when we emigrated over to Canada, watching the Remembrance Day parades as a young boy, and then becoming an Army cadet myself. And I remember the first day I stood in front of a cenotaph and had my FNC 1A1 inverted on the toe of my parade boot. And after the parade, and it was a cold day in Alberta, at the end of the parade, no one came by, no one said anything to me because I was just a young kid. It was all about the adults. And so when it came time to reinvert my FNC 1A1 and carry on with the rest of the parade, I walked home in my parade boots, and I could see the permanent mark in the toe of my boot. The barrel of my FN had created a divot in the toe of my boot, and that never went away, that divot. And years later, as a serving member, and then years after retiring out of the Canadian Armed Forces, those 3 phases taught me things. And today, as an older man, looking back over all of those years, each year I can understand that each year I better understand it. And so I don't think that Remembrance Day or remembering is truly understood until you start reflecting back on what it means, not only to ourselves, but to those that we are paying the dues to, who we are considering the moment of the day, what it means for them, not for us. And so I think that we all need little markers in our lives, like that little divot in my parade boot, to always keep as a constant reminder. Even as a young boy, it was powerful to me then, maybe more so than it is to me now, because it was my first instance where I thought, this is a mark on my boot, but it's a mark on my soul. And I think that that's something that people have lost sight of in today's society, perhaps because they don't have a mark on their boot to act as a reminder as to the privileges and the freedoms and the way of life that we all get to live, myself included, on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. We were actually in the green room before you came in, Shaun. We were talking about this. That, I remember growing up always having an outdoor ceremony for Remembrance Day. And so it was always cold, right? It was always, it's November in Alberta. It's usually freezing. There's snow on the ground. There's all kinds of stuff. And I remember I grew up and there was always this sting every year. Your ears stung, your fingers hurt. I never really understood why that we did it outside all the time up until I was an adult. I joined the military, started actually reflecting upon it, of standing in a trench with my fingers cold, my toes cold, my ears hurting, and like going, oh, I see why it is. And now I see a lot of indoor ceremonies, which are still great ceremonies, but it just takes that sting away. And I'm not sure if I really like it that much. It's great for my kids who,
I don't know.
what do you think?
I don't know because when I was in basic training in Wainwright, I had the privilege of acting as a marker at the cenotaph on an indoor parade, and I remember having my weapon inverted on my now larger sized boots, and I don't know why I was chosen to stand in that position of privilege, but it was hot in there, really hot. And I remember coming about that close to passing out. And I think the only reason I didn't pass out is because I was trying to represent, not me, but trying to represent the moment, trying to keep it together. Because if I would have hammered in, it would have felt disrespectful. So I hung on by a thin thread, managed to get through the ceremony, and sweating bullets down my back, a rivulet of sweat, not quite panicking, but super concerned that I wasn't going to be able to do my duty to respect the moment. So I don't know, man. They both got their own little sting, I think.
That's a great point. Randy, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with both of you, man. Hot or cold, there's an element of discomfort that is associated or connected with the people, the soldiers, men and women that suffered long before we really appreciate the value of Gore-Tex, for example. You can imagine World War One, World War Two. It was the material that they were fighting was very different than what we have the luxury of being exposed to today. And whether it's sweat or heat climates or extremely cold, what brings it together is the suffering. Whether it's an hour and a half of suffering outside in the cold or an hour and a half suffering inside in the heat, there's an element of suffering that is really the value of the moment. And I think it's great that you guys both mentioned that, and I agree with you 100%. Just walking out the door today, my wife does not like the cold, and she had multiple layers on. And as I approached the service downtown Ottawa, it's a chilly day today, as you can imagine. And I'm wearing a pair of jeans and, a layer that I know is not optimal for comfort. And I did that on purpose. And she's like, why don't you wear, a toque? Why don't you wear an extra layer? I said, because I can suffer for an hour and a half. And what does it mean really to anybody else? Doesn't matter. It's what it means to me. What it means to me is I will suffer a little bit in respect to the men and women who suffered a lot in order for us to live the way that we do.
Absolutely. Kate, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I've had to do a couple of times in Halifax, like be part of the parade for Remembrance Day. And, at that time, it's like if one person doesn't have their gloves or overcoat or whatever, then no one can wear it. And then they usually make the call the day of, and they, everyone's complaining that they're not allowed to wear that and that it's going to be cold. And it's sort of like you guys said, it kind of, there's not that element of suffering if you're all bundled up and you're nice and warm. And it's like maybe an hour at most, right? So it's like if you can't stand there for that long and just remember, people who went through that for like years. Yeah, just something to think about.
Absolutely. It's an interesting conversation too, because I really like how you put it, Randy, when you said that it doesn't matter what it is to anybody else, right? It's how you feel about it. And so I'm wondering, do you think that before you were in the military, before you had the experiences that we've had, do you think that your understanding has maybe changed, or has it just become more in depth? Like, do you think that it is a complete shift? Like, oh man, it's a totally different thing than I thought it was, or it's just been a kind of an evolution of it? Randy, I'm going to come back to you. What do you think?
I think I think it's changed, and I think there's an evolution throughout the years of prior to being a military member and then now being on the outside retired. There was an evolution of change and understanding and respect and appreciation for what we get a chance to live as Canadians today. It has definitely changed, and I'll share this story with you, which it burns me a little bit, but not really. Like, it's just something that I find really interesting. Is I have a good buddy of mine who is in the military, recently joined the military, so he's in the beginning stages of becoming a lineman, and he was telling me about his basic training experience, and he, as a bit of a backdrop, I'm not going to share his name, but as a bit of a backdrop, he's a former professional hockey player. He's a gem of a human being, and he's a beast of a man. He's the type of guy that you want in the military. He's the type of guy that if things go sideways, he's the guy that you want on your team. So you can imagine a little bit of his personality. So as he's going through basic training, I asked him about the graduation parade and leading up to it. So for those in the panel here, you've all gone through basic training, and you understand when drill is it's a necessary part of the development to becoming a brand new member of the military. Understanding how to march in sequence, understanding how to polish your boots properly. Some people find that stuff maybe novice or trivial or unimportant. I disagree. I think that those things are very valuable in terms of becoming the character of the Canadian Armed Forces that we want to represent. So where I'm going with that story is what he had shared with me is on their graduation parade, they did not do it in what's referred to as DEUs or dress uniforms. They did it in combat uniforms. They also did not do anything with firearms. So they did no firearms drill. To me, that's a problem. And I don't agree with it. because leading up to something that is such a influential and pivotal point of one's career and life, there's an element of suck that goes along with that. So not a lot of people enjoy parade, myself included. But what it does, though, is it teaches us to be part of a team, and it teaches us to bring our A game so we are in sequence. So when we step in sequence with a team, if we are not pulling our end of the requirement, the formation looks like shit, right? So we need to be in step. We need to be disciplined with what we're doing and where our mind is. If our mind is drifting on other things, then we become out of step and the whole formation looks less professional. Within that is, polishing your boots. Yeah, is it what seems like meaningless? Sure, at the time we don't really appreciate what it is that we're doing at the time, but what it does is it instills discipline, and it instills togetherness, and it instills a unity of formation, which to me is admirable and important. When it comes to using firearms, when you talk about the Canadian Armed Forces, when any of us think about what the Canadian Armed Forces do, there's an element of firearms that is directly correlated with what we do as Canadian Armed Forces members. So for a newly distinguished Canadian Armed Forces member to not do a parade in dress uniform, to not do a parade with firearms, to me, you're robbing those individuals of an experience that they will never, ever have an opportunity to get back. And it burned me a little bit when he told me the story, and I asked him what was the reason for it. And he was pretty frank and blunt with me, and that's why I respect him. He said what they were told was there are some people who are too weak to, improperly or physically prepared to handle the firearm in a parade setting without the concern of them thundering in or becoming fatigued. So they said, we're going to make it as easy as we possibly can. They took the firearms out of it. They took the dress uniforms out of it because they didn't have enough adequate boots to put on the feet of these individuals. Listen, I'm not making this political, and I certainly don't intend to. However, to me, there's a fundamental flaw in that whole process. There is an element that has been missed with those individuals, and unfortunately, they're not going to get it back. There is no way to replicate basic training experience, and it's unfortunate, but that's the reality. Where am I going with this story? Because you guys know me well enough to know that I want to share some positive, and I'm not, casting shade on anybody or trying to be negative or shit on anybody. But here's the reality. The positive takeaway is this. The way I look at it is, and this is what I shared with the individual, is you still shared something together. Yes, there was an element that was missed and you won't get it back. However, take away from the fact that you still marched in unison, you still worked towards stepping in order, and you still worked towards doing something that was together. So that's the positive. However, looking back at what he shared with me, it's disappointing. Yeah, nobody likes drill, but there's such an important piece to discipline and walking and moving together in unison, looking sharp. That is really important, and it has a lot to do with the development moving forward as a Canadian Armed Forces member.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's that's a challenging situation to hear about, but yeah. Shaun, you got any thoughts on that?
I do, and I'm kind of in line with Randy as well, and I'm going to try to keep it positive as well. Though I do have to start off by being super clear on this, that one of the reasons that the final parades are typically done, or were done in my day, is so that you can demonstrate precision of dress, precision of stance, precision of movement. Not looking like a bag of hammers in a combat uniform. You cannot look sharp in a combat uniform. You can look okay, but you cannot look sharp. There are no sharp lines. There are no sharp details. There is not a stature within you when you're wearing a baggy combat uniform. What a combat uniform can do is disguise the lack of sharpness. And to me, the culmination of a training program to that extent, it should illustrate that you showed up without an edge, and you were turned into an edge by the end of the process. So a DU helps represent your improvements, not only within the system as a whole, but your improvements as a human being, showing up as a bag of hammers, as we all did, and then being turned into a hammer through the process. So it's disappointing to hear that either the standards have slipped to such a degree that it's come to this, and to build on that, the aspect of no weapons on the final parade, that is a long-standing tradition that has preceded all of us and represents, as Randy said, the Canadian Armed Forces. I was a freaking cadet and I had a FNC 1A1. So how is it that adult serving members who are here to not only defend our country, defend our way of life, but also defend the freedoms of others internationally, how is it that that can't be represented? I don't understand that at all. But I suppose, given the modern age, certain adjustments have to be made to work with the people that are within the current program. And I feel that there's a middle ground that could have been achieved there. And I don't think that middle ground was achieved based on what Randy has just relayed. And so it feels to me, just based on my initial thoughts, that it went from the standard to the extreme of the opposite of the standard in that moment. It would have been nice if, at the very least, someone could have hung out in the middle. So what is the positive out of this story? Well, the positive is how we're talking about it right now. I don't accept that low standard, nor should anyone else. So the message would be, let's all try and do a little bit better. For all the folks on that parade that were too weak, and let's call it out, that's soft, man.
Yeah.
And the Canadian Armed Forces was never a soft organization.
Yeah.
And so we all have to do better within the institution itself, at command levels, at the levels that are holding people accountable to meet the bare minimum standard that we all represent. And further to that, as Randy stated in his opening sequence, I believe it was, applying direct action, a combative direct action lifestyle against life. That's what we're all supposed to do on the daily. And so this conversation is kind of directly addressing the shortfall or the underperformance aspect of an institution that is supposed to genuinely treasure the standards that were set decades ago by people who paid for those standards with their lives so that we can enjoy the quality of lives that aren't supposed to make us weaker in life.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Kate, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, just sort of going along the lines of what Randy and Shaun were saying about wearing the uniform and looking sharp. Because I mean, I've been on, parades where the chief is threatening people if they don't show up with their uniform pressed the next day, and then this guy shows up with a wrinkled uniform and dog hair all over it, looking like a bag of hammers, as Shaun would say, right? So it's, every time you put that uniform on, but especially today, you should make sure, if you have a question about where a certain badge goes or whatever, right? Like take that upon yourself to look up the dress manual, which you can Google in 2 seconds, and like make sure that you're dressed properly and that you're, take the extra time to iron it properly, polish your boots, look sharp, because especially, today you're not just representing yourself, you're representing everyone who can't wear that uniform anymore. So there's a guy, I don't know who it is, but on Instagram, I came across this page a while back. It's called Uninformed Uniforms, because there's been a lot of people just doing random things like outside of the dress manual. And anyway, so they made a post today, and I kind of want to get your guys' thoughts on it. So it said the absolute state of some of the uniforms today in the NCR, which is the National Capital Region, was disgraceful. Pip and crown in the wrong order, wearing too toques and topcoat, ponytails and Viking hair, unpolished shoes. Shame on you who disgraced your uniforms on this sacred day.
Yeah, Kate, and I respect what you're sharing, and I saw it as well, and I shook my head on more than one occasion with what I saw as acceptable, and it is disappointing that, and there's an element on the individual to turn themselves out properly, and there's an element on their teammates to look out for each other. It's like, and I agree with you, Kate. If you don't know where a certain thing is supposed to go in terms of where the regulations state that a certain badge should go, people sometimes are like, it's not that important, man. Whatever, I don't care. Well, you should care. You should care, because you're representing the uniform, you're representing the country, and you're representing the people who are no longer with us. So you should care. And if you don't care, now you have my attention, and it's probably the wrong attention. Because if you don't have the energy, the effort, and the desire to put your uniform the way it needs to be, to shine your boots the way they need to be, then you, my friend, are not part of the organization that I chose to be part of. And if you have a problem with it, the way I would say it, and I would look them right in the eye and say, then you need to find another occupation. Then you need to go somewhere where the standards just don't matter. Because in our world, the standards do matter, because it's the difference between life and death. And I would bring it into that emotional context. And if people are like, whoa, settle down. It's not that big a deal. It is a big deal. You chose this life. No one put a gun to your head and said, you need to serve our country. This is our country. You chose to do it. In doing so, there's a responsibility to ensure that wherever that medal needs to be, wherever that certain representation of the military needs to be, then you know where it needs to go. And if your buddy doesn't need to, or your buddy has that information, then he needs to step in and say, hey, man, that medal needs to be here. That's your job as a team. That's what we do. We look out for each other. So we look out for each other by stepping onto a parade square or onto a parade setting in a formal setting. We look out for each other. Say, hey, man, I need 10 minutes to ensure that this is where it needs to be. And whether that's getting the dog hair off the uniform or whatever it is, there's some pride that needs to be adhered to. And I have a problem with folks that think that it's okay because, it's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal. Yeah, are people dying? No. Are there bullets flying? No, not yet. Not yet. But when they do, here in our country, are you the one that's going to help us out? Are you the one that's going to represent our country? Well, if you don't have the time to put into your uniform to make sure it's squared away, I would question whether or not you're the person I'm going to lean on when shit goes sideways.
So I'm going to ask you again to you got to watch the language there, Randy. I appreciate the fervor. I do, but we got to watch the language. So now this actually
Randy's getting me fired up because I'm about a half an inch from dropping some F-bombs myself, and I'm going to try not to. And so it is important what Randy and Kate just said. And so I think the thing that is under my skin right now is if the standard isn't being met, that's a failure for strong leaders. That's a failure of, at the very least, the senior NCOs who should be getting a freaking grip on that moment and jacking someone up for not having the common decency to represent the uniform accordingly. But there's another aspect to it that I think is devilish, and that is I've seen it in an attitude, and it's almost a pushback against the institution. It's almost a pushback against I'm gonna set up my hair in a way that annoys people. That is a kind of an in-your-face screw you to the institution. Now, if you got some dog hair on your uniform and I'm standing there, I'll either sort you out, or I'll jack you up. But if you're flaring out with the wrong intentions, well, that's a whole different thing. And I have seen it, and I'm not sure what's going on in the Canadian Armed Forces right now at that level where people feel like they have the right to run it the way that they want to run it.
Well, I would say, sorry,
I don't understand.
I would say, if you don't mind, and I don't mean to interrupt you, I would say, like, yes, when there's someone who's, lashing out or just choosing to wear the uniform the way they are. Yeah, there's an element where the chain of command could step in, but it's deeper than that, because it's not the chain of command's fault. Like, people who choose to join the military, they're adults and they should be treated as such. When people who are part of the institution, they get their backs up because they're being treated like a kid, it's because those one-off situations. It's because this small percentage that choose to lash out or choose not to, to fall in line. And that's problematic, because now it becomes a chain of command issue where it doesn't have to be, and nor should it be, because the chain of command has other things that are way more important to deal with than dress and deportment of an individual. Where I'm going with that is, we as the member at the lowest level, you could have 10 minutes in the military. 10 minutes, doesn't matter, you have no experience. That's okay. Ask people that have more experience to help get you squared away, so that it doesn't become a chain of command issue. So, like, yes, I agree with you, Shaun, but I'll also push back a little bit. It's like, when it comes to dress and deployment, that should not become a chain of command issue. You're taught that in basic training. You're taught how to behave, how to represent the uniform. Then it's up to you as the member to live it and be it. And if you're not in line with it, man, with all due respect, beat it. Like, go find another line of work, man, because there's other places that would love to take you, but Canadian Forces, no. There's a higher level expectation, I believe, and maybe I'm reaching. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but that's the way I look at it. Like, this should not be a chain of command issue.
I agree. We're definitely on the same sheet of music on that. In fact, you said what I would have liked to have said, and so I think talking about giving an inch. I think that there's an old saying: if someone's given an inch, they'll take a mile eventually. Now, the only time that we should be giving an inch as the Canadian Armed Forces is if we've planned out a tactical withdrawal in order to suck someone in order to crush it a few minutes later. The only time that we should be giving up an inch is because it's planned, not because we're lazy. And so, to Randy's point, there will be a time in the future where we cannot afford to give an inch. We need to take the mile rather than give up an inch. And so I'm a strong proponent of the standard is the standard. You either meet it or you beat it. And that's it. That's all. And so I wholeheartedly agree with what you said, Randy.
Bam. Kate, got any points to add?
No, I can't really add much to that.
It's pretty to the point, right? I have one, I guess, thought or question on this, and that is, it's kind of funny because you bring up the regalia, and I was big into that. I was the guy that I would walk around like, your tie is messed up, fix it. I don't know how to tie a tie. I'm going to teach you right now. Let's go. At your collar dogs, no, sort those out. They're wrong. They're off by 0.5 millimeter. I was that guy. And there were a lot of people that would get annoyed at me, but I was adamant throughout my entire career. It's one of the few things that I never let up on was the DEUs needed to be perfect. Not okay, they needed to be perfect as per the PAM. So the fact that it all those things, it drove me nuts. But one of the things I wanted to bring up was the fact that the dog hair. I had lint rollers in my car. Did you not? You guys, like, the moment you get out of your car, you have a lint roller just immediately.
I had spare lint rollers,
right?
Spare lint rollers, so that I could walk by, jack someone up, give them the lint roller, and say, "Come and find me in 5 minutes with a clean uniform." I mean, that's just the way it was.
Yeah.
So,
I agree with you, Chance. Like, one word that I don't have a hard time with is perfect. Perfect doesn't exist, but I know what you mean. Excellence. Look sharp. Like, clean yourself up, clean your uniform up, look good, man. Like, perfect doesn't exist, but I admire your attention to detail. If the collar dog is not where it needs to be, you take the time, you mentor this young man, this young woman, you help them. You're not scolding them. There's no need to belittle somebody or make them feel like less of a human being. That's not the point. The point is, we're together, and I'm helping you. I can see that your collar dog is crooked. I'm going to help you. I'm not making you stand at attention, making you feel like you're less of a human being. That's not the point. And I think sometimes people that are in a chain of command position, put your heels together. You'll stand at attention when I'm talking to you. Like, settle down, man. Like, no shots are being fired here. Nobody's dying. Settle down. However, I respect the fact and I appreciate that, yes, you want this person to look sharp and represent the unit, represent the organization, represent the country. I get it. But let's be real and let's like simmer down a little bit. Shots are not being fired. People are not dying. However, this person we have an opportunity to share with this person, like, hey, take a few minutes, take a few seconds to ensure that that's squared away. I think that's a good thing. And it's all about the approach and communication. Like, man, making somebody feel like they're dirt because, things are not where that needs to be, that will have an effect. Guiding somebody, mentoring somebody, showing somebody, and then educating them on where it needs to be, that's a different experience that person will never forget.
Yeah, 100%. We have a couple comments here I want to touch on because they
Yes.
hit this very well. So Glenn jumped in here earlier, said, "What's up, everyone? Good to see you, Glenn." Winterstorm mentioned suffering needs to be experienced, otherwise there is no empathy, which I think is exactly what we're talking about, even in the minuscule things like your collar dogs are off by half an inch, right? Like half a millimeter even. Like there's a bit of suffering with that. It sucks trying to put those things in right just to but got to do it. Glenn says, I totally agree with Randy in regards to drill. I found it did bring the squad together and allow us to get our collective minds right and switched on. And I was one of the few, again, that I enjoy drill. I like it. I love the precision of it. And when you can get people to halt like right on time and get that echo through the drill hall, it just feels good.
It does, man. Yes, it does.
100%.
And you know what? And unless you've experienced it, it's very tough to share that with people that have no idea. But I agree with you, Chance, man. It's such it raises the small hairs on your back. It's like, yeah, that was good.
100%. And then Winterstorm, this is the one I wanted to bring up. He says, to the point about looking sharp. If you don't take pride in yourself, then who will? Which I think is a great question. And he continues, and we must remember when you wear a uniform, it's not your uniform. It's everyone's uniform, including those who came before you and those after you. That is probably the best way I've ever heard of putting it. So well done, Winterstorm. Any thoughts on that one, Shaun?
Yeah. I said that if someone was out of line in the standard of the dress uniform on a particular important day, I would jack him up. Now, what does jacking someone up mean? It doesn't mean that I'm making them do burpees in their DEU. It doesn't mean that I'm spitting saliva on their face as I go full metal jacket. What it does mean is I'm making sure that they're aware that they kind of botched it. And by botched it, I mean, like, if I'm standing in front of them at that moment, it means that I'm about the 8th level of leadership that is now eyeballing them. And that means that the previous 7, from the moment that they woke up in the morning and looked at themselves in the mirror, that's the first level that kind of not failed, but didn't meet the standard. The next level was their bunkie, didn't meet the standard. And so when it gets to me as a senior NCO and I'm looking them in the eye and saying, what is even going on here? That's a failure of several systems. And so it's not that I'm going to go all crazy on them, but I'm going to, in no uncertain terms, help them understand that this is unacceptable. Square yourself away, come and find me in a few minutes, and we'll revisit what's going on here. That's me jacking them up. And so that is kind of the story of the Canadian Armed Forces to some degree. At some point, if the layers are slipping, someone has to hold the line, not give up that half inch. And I always felt responsible to hold the line, as it were, as did all of my peers. My circle of friends, the senior NCOs that I worked alongside of, there was no budge. There was no inch given. It was a ferocious standard. And so I always felt that it would be disrespectful to the people who came before me not to hold the line, as it were.
Absolutely. Kate, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I guess. Well, also now with the CAF where they have the new hair for gens and there's different regulations. I don't know offhand because I always just put my hair in a tight bun anyway for that. But in DEUs, I think there are different regulations, right? So even if you do have longer hair and stuff, I believe now it still can't touch your collar. And, even if you're a guy with like, say, longer hair, you can still put it in a nice, like, sharp bun or ponytail so that it looks sharp, or like brush your hair. I mean, I've seen some people, it looks like they don't even brush their hair. Um, but yeah, I mean, especially on days where you're wearing the DEUs, it's like things are changing in the CAF with the hair forgens and the dress regs. But I mean, you can still look sharp. You can still take that pride in representing that uniform.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kate. Like we all, when we're in the uniform, we have an opportunity to represent the uniform, represent the unit that is on that uniform, right? So there's the uniform itself, whether you're Navy element, Air Force element, Army element, and then there's a subunit that's part of that. But at the end of the day, every one of those uniforms have what on it? What is the common basic denominator is the Canadian flag. So whatever the regulations are, I believe policy needs to change. I believe those regulations need to be adjusted, because right now it's gone way too far on the other side. I saw people today. It was a disgrace to look at them. Hair like out of control with braids. I saw one dude in uniform wearing earrings. A dude wearing earrings. Now, what he represents or identifies as, none of my business. But you have hair and a face that looks like a man, but you're wearing earrings in a uniform. Problematic, and it just does not look professional. And you're representing you, but remember, it's not about you. It's about the flag. It's about the country, and it's about the people before you that enable you to do what you're doing. Don't forget that.
Yeah, that is 100% on that one. When a storm hit it again, he says the external pride you show in your uniform is the internal pride you have in yourself. And I think this is something that I don't know if it's been forgotten, because I remember when I was in, which is a number of years ago, right? So I'm not up on how everything works at this point in time. But when I first got in, there were certain things that kind of confused me, I guess, in terms of how I expected the military to be. One of them was the fact that there were different dress regs for different people, right? So one of them was the fact that, women didn't have to shave their head where guys did. And I was like, well, hair's hair, right? It makes no sense to me. But at the end of the day, it doesn't make that much of a difference, but I think it really does in the early days, right? Later on in time, when you're in the forces for a while, you understand all of the different pieces and the elements that have been built upon. Then I think is where you can start to, at least, I wouldn't say mess with the standard, but like understand where it comes from, if that makes any sense.
It makes total sense. I agree with you 100%. So for an example, if somebody wants to represent and, dive into a career in the Canadian Armed Forces, and part of that, they understand they have to do, it's not the right word. They have the opportunity to do 10 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever it is, for basic training. In that 12 weeks, they already know ahead of time, your day one, you're going to have your head shaved. And if that person balks and they're like, you know what, I want to work for the Canadian Armed Forces, I want to be part of this, but no, I'm not shaving my head. I would say to them, how much do you really want this? And what are your motivations? Because if you're not willing to shave your head for 10 weeks or 12 weeks to be part of a team who are all the same, we're all going to shave our head because we're all the same, right? Like that's what's being preached, right? We're all equal, right? So male, female, you're going to shave your head. If you are committed to representing the Canadian Armed Forces, shaving your head is going to be such a small thing. You're like, whatever, let's get on with it. And then when we're done basic training, to your point, Chance, then sure, okay, you're a female, you want to grow your hair. That makes sense, man. Totally makes sense. But my point is, if you want to be part of this for 10 weeks or 12 weeks, you need to shave your head. And now you're part of a bigger picture. If that person balks at it, I would question, like, I'm not sure that your intentions are in the right place.
Yeah, that's a great question. Kate, any thoughts?
No, I think I kind of did think that I was going to have to shave my head before I went to basic training. And honestly, like having the hair was kind of a pain in the butt for most of the times, and a couple of girls did. But yeah, I can definitely understand where you're coming from on that one. It's like, yeah, if you're not gonna make those little sacrifices, then what won't you do when it comes to something bigger?
That's my point, Kate. That is my point. If you're not willing to sacrifice your hair, what else are you not willing to sacrifice? How much do you want? Like, I want what I want when I want it, and I want it 10 minutes ago. Want, want, want. What about give? What about sacrifice? What about providing for others? Like, what about that? That's what I would ask the person. And like, maybe it's unfair because I have been, I guess, and now I'm somewhere different. Maybe it's unfair for me to say that. Maybe it's a little bit too harsh, but I don't think so. Like, I'm saying it because I believe in it.
Yeah, absolutely, Shaun.
When I was a kid, it was called joining the service. It actually wasn't called joining the Canadian Armed Forces. It was when people would ask me, "What are you doing?" I would say, "I'm going to go join the service." The service, to serve, not serve me, serve my fellow men, serve my country, serve my uniform, serve service. And maybe it's a word that, given the time of year, it seems apropos that we should be talking about service. And somehow, perhaps some people have lost their way to some degree. On the hair piece, I know that it seems like a minor blip on the radar in respect to all of the things that the Canadian Armed Forces does and is, and the greatness of the institution. But I do recall the first year the Operation Pegasus Jump ran, so that's now 2 years ago, I suppose, nearly. I was walking through one of the large tents, and there's a few guys sitting around, 4 or 5 guys, all good guys, solid, hard chargers, salt of the earth. I would, I'd trust them with my life. And I sat down and we were chatting away, and I didn't really know the fellas too well. I just know them by reputation. And the subject was kind of starting to get a bit spicy in respect to the new hair standards that were just coming into the Canadian Armed Forces. And I listened and thought about what they were saying, and then I basically said, I hear what you guys are saying, and I don't fully understand what's coming down the pipeline in respect to this, but I will say this, that currently the Canadian Armed Forces is small and getting smaller. There are not enough people entering into battle school. There are not enough people signing up to serve their country. And so it's a modern world that is adjusting. And as an institution, we all have to adjust to our modern world. I don't care what color a person's hair is, nor do I care about its length, as long as they are meeting the standard. And so if the standard allows them to look like a clown, then I guess here we go. But that's not what the standard is right now. The standard only states that hair can be played with to some degree. And do I agree with it? No. But we have to make adjustments in a modern society to ensure that the Canadian Armed Forces has manpower. Where I think, as I said to the fellas, where I think it will all eventually go is it will recalibrate itself. We're in a moment of discomfort because we came from high standards, and it feels to us like the standard has slipped to such a degree that the institution is being misrepresented by this backslide. But we have to learn to adjust, and I think in time it will adjust, and this is just a momentary discomfort phase as the system learns to work with the modern recruit who has expectations that are dissimilar from what our beliefs or expectations were when we all joined. Did it make me happy to have that conversation and say that to those guys? Not at all. Because as I was sitting on the table and they were sitting in the chairs, they were looking at me like, what? Is this the guy that we know? Because I'm not known for being as open-minded as that in respect to, oh, it's a modern world and everyone can just flare out with their pink hair. That is not me, but I understand that the times are changing. And again, if however you want to wear your hair, it's cool with me as long as you are freaking meeting the standard. So that's all I've got to say on that before launching into a tirade, I suppose.
You know, there's been a moment where I keep seeing your hand kind of twitch every so while. You just want to, like the knife hand's like, no, just
I'm
keep it
biting
tight
down
there.
on my mouthpiece.
It's fantastic. It is a contentious issue, and it is something that, you know, I remember hearing from the guys that had been in longer than when I first got in, the guys that had been in for 10 or 20 years saying, you know, oh, you know, you have it all so easy. And then I remember doing it same thing to a bunch of new recruits who came by, and I was just like, oh, your life is so easy. I think it might be a little bit of just as things progress, because I'm sure there were dudes that were balking at the fact that you didn't have to run in combat boots, right? That you had to have running shoes in basic instead of combat boots, right? So there are progressions that are going to happen. I think that just some of the old boys are going to have to kind of deal with a little bit. Kate, you gotta,
yes,
Randy,
yes.
what do you got?
Yeah. I'm sorry. I don't mean to hijack. And Kate, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say too. Yeah. Yes, we have to adapt. I get it, but within reason and with what makes sense. So for an example, you know, Chance and Shaun, I'm sure you guys remember this for sure. It was not that long ago where we would do live fire section attacks, no eye protection, no hearing protection. Do you guys remember that? I remember that, and I still hear it.
Sorry, sorry, I can't hear you.
What?
This is a true story. It wasn't that long ago. Live fire section attacks for days. I'm not exaggerating. No eye protection, no hearing protection. And for those guys that were smart enough to bring foamies or even a cigarette butt and they would jam it in their ear, there would be section commanders screaming at them, get that shit out of your ears. Excuse me, sorry. Get that stuff out of your ears because you cannot hear commands. And then we evolved because it makes sense. We're like, wait a minute. We can still do this with protection to save and persevere these soldiers that we're training. So things evolve. So evolution of stuff that makes sense, yes, let's implement it. But to me, this is not an evolution. This is not an evolution to anything productive or positive. I truly believe to the core of my being, and I hope I'm wrong, when things go sideways in this country, the people that believe our Canadian Armed Forces are going to step up and do the right thing are going to be sadly disappointed, because those folks who we've allowed to change the trajectory of standards are not going to make the call. And for those folks out there who are listening, who believe it's not going to happen in Canada, wake up. Wake up. It very much can happen in Canada at any given moment. So when things do go sideways and people are legitimately dying, we're going to need good men and good women to step up and be disciplined and do stuff that is absolutely extraordinary. So that's why I have a hard time with accepting pink hair. That's why I have a hard time accepting this notion that we are all the same. We are not all the same, man. And that's okay. It's okay to be different. But to Chance's point, you can be different as long as you're meeting the standard. You can be different if you are a warrior. I don't care if you choose to wear a pink tutu on your time. But on the military's time, you step forward, you represent the uniform, and you wear it with respect and pride.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be really hard to camouflage pink hair. Just the first thing in my head.
Yeah, you're not allowed to. And I think they have rules like in the field. Obviously, if it's going to be something like where there's an issue like that, then you can't. And there's certain stipulations. But yeah, I mean, I do think, I don't know, like I'm, I guess, a little bit old school, and that, you know, I think you should still always look sharp. I don't know if, I don't know that this is like the solution to fix this recruiting crisis, right? Like Shaun was saying that the numbers are so low now. And I listened to Andy Stumpf a lot, and he was saying, not necessarily like mandatory military service, because that's not for everyone, but young people should have to do some sort of service to their country in some capacity, maybe not necessarily the military, but some sort of like public service, after they finish high school or something. And it's because I feel like, we're getting away from that, maybe the younger generation, like where they're not wanting to serve their country, or I don't even know how to articulate this, but it just seems like it's not a thing now. Like they don't want to do that. The ones that do are like the ones that, you know, okay, I want to train and join and go JTF and do this stuff. But other younger people are just not seeing the military as like a good option and something to, or something like not even a good option, but they're not wanting to serve their country.
Yeah, we had Alan Mack on a little while ago. He was saying basically the same thing, that there should be some sort of generalized service where you go join the Peace Corps for a little while, or you do, but it's like a couple years of direct service to the nation in some capacity, and I think it would be great. I don't, I have
You
a
had
hard
to
time
bring
with
up
anything
Alan
mandatory.
Mack's name. You had to bring up Alan Mack's name because the moment that you bring up Alan Mack's name, it triggers the conversation of Starship Troopers that we had. And as far as I'm concerned, holy moly, prepare to launch. So, Starship Troopers. One of the central themes of Starship Troopers is if you serve within the military or the armed forces of the Federation at the time, then that's how you earned your citizenship. That's how you became a citizen. If you did not serve, you weren't considered as a citizen. Now, that's a super strong stance, of course, within Starship Troopers. But that isn't the message of if you don't serve, you're not a citizen. The message is this: you have to serve something bigger than yourself. You have to make sacrifices more than you need to or want to. You have to sacrifice a lot of things in order to have a right to say the things that you just casually want to say without thought.
Yeah.
Part of our society nowadays hasn't sacrificed enough or isn't. I was in the Singapore airport on the way here to Malaysia, and as I looked around, 99% of the men in that boarding area were soft. I mean, soft like jelly roll soft. Like not a shred of hardness in them. Our society is now set up where you don't have to be hard. You can be soft and continue to get softer and softer and softer and softer until the day you die. That's how we're set up. In fact, I said at one point that the way we're going right now, it's like little rabbits bumping their noses a little against the food tube, getting their insta food, and just getting softer for it. There is no true hard warrior path in front of most society right now. When we were out on the plains, as we were talking about, out in the savannah, where it was life or death, where you had to go and hunt your meal, those were hard times. That created hard people. That created people who knew what was right and wrong, the importance of a moment. Nowadays, the moment is lost to most people. They're blindly bumbling through the world, getting softer. And to Randy's point, I agree. In the near future, there will be a course correction. And that course correction is not going to be pretty. It's not going to be pretty because there are going to be a bunch of jelly rolls quivering on the streets, wondering what is happening. And the pink hair isn't going to change the velocity of the bullet.
No.
Our society's lost its way, in my eyes. I think that when I look back to World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, the large conflicts with massive adversity and massive hardship created people that were respectful of the rights of themselves as a citizen and the citizen to their left and right. It is something that you learn through struggle, through maintaining a standard, through seeing others suffer alongside of you. Nowadays, suffering is if your internet goes out. The world has got soft. And I don't know how I got on this tirade, but freaking Alan Mack with the conversation of Starship Troopers, got me all fired up. So I wish that every person in Canada could just sit down for a moment and think about how easy their lives are right now. Easy, created on the backs of people who died for that.
Yes.
Your freedoms and your ability to color your hair whichever way you want comes from death of
Yes.
good men and women who granted you that ability to have pink hair. So at the very freaking least, you should respect the fact that your hair comes from death, not just mindlessly waking up in the morning and getting to do what you do because you want to do you. Well, congratulations. You have that privilege, but never lose sight of the fact that that privilege was granted to you by blood, coffins, a flag that lays in the mud next to poppies. Our society has lost its way.
This is like I said, a contentious topic, and we are at an hour. I know we could sit and probably talk about this all night, but I'm gonna call it here. So I'm wondering. I gotta get this point out before I finish. Before we get final thoughts on it. On a rough estimate right now, 128,000 people have died in the service of Canada throughout all the conflicts that we have been in. And so when I was talking to a bunch of students at my son's school yesterday for their Remembrance Day ceremony, I tried to get this across to them is that those are just big numbers. You can see pictures of people through a slideshow. You can understand that, people have died for the ideas that we live for today. The one thing that I did with the kids was I told them about my friends, right? I told them little bits of what Shaun was like. I told them little bits about what Dustin was like, about the people that I knew that died in the service of their nation, so that at least the kids could come to an understanding that these are people. 128,000 Canadians have served and died under the flag for a standard that we all enjoy. So I think that's very important that we understand that it's not just a number of 128,000. This is people, fathers, sons, daughters, wives, husbands, people with lives and stories and family. And I think it's a very important thing that we come across today. So I really want to say how much I appreciate the conversation, because this is a very poignant day, poignant conversation. So I really appreciate it. Kate, you got any final thoughts on anything we've gone over so far today?
Yeah, I guess just my final thought is, you threw that number out there, and I think a lot of people think about, people dying in combat, which of course we have to remember all of those people as well. But there's been a lot of training accidents in the past few years, at home where we think that like we're safe. This is what's happening, but people don't understand that like that's a huge risk as well. At home, even if you're not deployed on a combat mission, there's still always those risks. We just had the Chinook crash a couple of months ago. We had the Snowbirds crash, the helicopter that was deployed on Operations. There's been a few Army incidents as well on training bases in Canada, and not to mention all of the hundreds of people who have lost their struggles with mental health, right? So all of that, I think, all of those people need to be remembered.
Absolutely. Randy, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I echo Kate's thoughts. Like, there's people that who have chosen to serve the country who are no longer with us, and because of training accidents or mental health issues. And it's not that long ago that we all are connected to somebody that either took their own life because they chose a life to serve the country. And the Canadians that don't know them, it doesn't have the same weight or value. It doesn't resonate with them. And I'm not saying that you should think about these people or consider these people, not at all, because you don't know them. So why would you? But as a Canadian who lives the life that we do, we have to think about two things, in my opinion, two things to support what Kate just talked about. Like, people are coming to work every day in uniform, and there are a lot of hard hitters and there are a lot of alphas who just want to get after it, and they are willing to get after it, and they pride themselves on their physical fitness, they pride themselves on their mental health, they pride themselves on being the best version of themselves that they can be every day. But until we have political support to allow these men and women to go do their job, not a lot is going to change. So we need political support. We need the higher echelon of the military professionals who are in a position of influence to push back and say, let these men and women go do their job. It's like having a Ferrari, a high performance vehicle that's parked in the garage with a tarp over top of it. Every now and again, you need to let that thing out and let the ponies run. The reason that there's mental health issues because guys are losing, women too, are losing their purpose. They're losing the why they're doing what they're doing. We need the political powers to say, go do it. Go do your job. You can do it. And I know it. And I trust you. And I know you're going to make wise decisions. We need the higher echelon of our military personnel to say, I support them. They are great men and women. They're professionals. They're going to do the best job that they can to represent this country. We need to give them the opportunity to do it. Because otherwise you have a high performing, high capable piece of equipment tucked into a garage with a tarp put over top of it. And people will lose their way, they will lose their purpose, and they will find other things to do.
Yeah, 100%. Shaun, any final thoughts?
I do. I'll dial it back a bit. I would say that there's two pieces to that point, as Randy just stated. There needs to be support at a political level, but the political level is created by the people. And I feel that perhaps the biggest tragedy of the institution at this moment is the fact that Canadians aren't supporting things correctly. Canadians, I think, have somehow lost the sense of the importance of the Canadian Armed Forces as an institution, and therefore aren't banging on doors to say budgets need to increase, operational capacities need to increase. We don't understand what's coming in the future, but we trust that our senior leaders within the Canadian Armed Forces can guide this ship with appropriate financial support. The population as a whole needs to get involved with grassroots politics or the highest level of politics, and not only be a squeaky wheel, but demand more of our institution, the Canadian Armed Forces, that will respond to that demand once it gets the support that it so sorely needs. You can have a Ferrari in a garage with a tarp over it, and it is going nowhere if there isn't enough money to buy the gas. So, as a whole, Canadian citizens, the common man, your neighbor, needs to shake its fist, not at the clouds and complain, needs to shake its fist at the powers that be so that it understands that the Canadian Armed Forces needs help and the citizens demand that it is offered.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to be said. Like I was saying earlier, I do want to mention the fact that it is the 70th anniversary of the end of the Korean War as well. So that is another thing that we should be not only aware of, but I find a lot of the people that I know that never served have very little knowledge of what Canada has done around the world. So that is, I think, something that more people need to know about. I try to do my best every day to make sure that people know more. That's part of what we do here at the collective. So get people thinking, get people talking, getting people doing all these things. Hopefully they'll learn more about everything they do. Once they learn more, then they can build upon it. And once they can build upon it, they can grow all kinds of grassroots organizations and pressure in any way towards politics, because that's the only way we're going to do it, is by the people consistently learning, building, growing with us here on the collective. We'll see you all tomorrow. Chimo.
Chemo.